The city of Fortaleza, in the state of Ceará, was experiencing a period of economic growth and regional stability in 2005. Known for its stunning beaches and tourism, it also faced common challenges seen in many Brazilian cities, such as high rates of violence and social inequality. It was an environment where increasingly organized criminal groups were gaining strength, training and equipping themselves for more complex crimes. The Central Bank of Brazil maintained an important branch there, located on Avenida Desembargador Moreira, in the Aldeota neighborhood. This was one of the most relevant financial centers in the Northeast region, responsible for managing part of the currency in circulation in the state. The building was monitored, had cameras, metal bars, and private security, but did not have armed surveillance during weekends. And it was precisely during this low-security period between Saturday, August 6th and Sunday, August 7th, 2005, that criminals put into action a plan that would become known as the largest bank heist in Brazilian history up to that point. The attack would remain undetected until the next day, when employees arrived for work on Monday, August 8th. In preparation for the crime, the criminals chose a weekend with minimal staff presence and no scheduled cash movements. They studied the routines of employees, the flow of money, and the gaps in security coverage. Everything indicated that the group had access to privileged information or had spent months observing the branch without raising suspicion. For weeks before the heist, the group monitored the area discreetly. They visited the location, mapped out escape routes, identified blind spots in surveillance, and tested different times to avoid detection. Their level of planning was so advanced that they even simulated normal activity around the target site to prevent any unusual behavior from being noticed. To reach the vault of the central bank, the criminals needed to enter through another nearby building. They chose a vacant house behind the bank, separated only by a short wall. That house would serve as their operational base for digging a tunnel that would lead directly to the heart of the bank. The tunnel construction required intense physical effort, time, and patience. Working mostly at night, the criminals dug about 25 meters of earth and concrete, avoiding loud noises that could alert neighbors or surveillance cameras. They used manual tools and small machines to keep everything as quiet as possible. Additionally, the group employed techniques to divert closed-circuit TV signals, temporarily disabling the cameras that could capture their movements. They also installed fake motion sensors to trick the bank's security system. It was as if time had stopped for the rest of the world while the thieves did their job. The entire planning phase lasted several months. There was constant observation of employee behavior, entry and exit schedules, cash transportation logistics, and even how the vault was replenished. Everything was carefully studied in advance. Had someone inside the system provided information? That question would only be answered much later. When they finally accessed the vault, the thieves found a fortune in cash. Around 164 million reais, equivalent to approximately $500 million reais today, was packed into bags, boxes, and backpacks, then quickly transported to strategically positioned vehicles around the area. The operation took less than 10 hours. From the initial invasion to the final departure, everything was done with extreme organization. There was no gunfire, no victims, and no one in the neighborhood suspected anything. On Monday morning, when the first employees arrived at the bank, chaos began to unfold. On Monday, August 8, 2005, bank employees noticed something strange. The vault doors were open. There were signs of drilling on the walls, and the money was simply gone. One of the largest thefts in Brazilian history had just been discovered, and the entire country would soon be shocked by the scale and boldness of the crime. At the time of the robbery, Brazil was going through a phase of economic stabilization under the government of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Although the economy was showing signs of recovery, the country still faced major challenges in public safety and financial oversight. While large cities saw improvements in some areas, smaller towns and poorer neighborhoods remained vulnerable to crime. Fortaleza was growing economically and becoming an important banking hub in the Northeast. Banks and financial institutions were expanding operations in the city, including the central bank, which handled large sums of cash intended for local circulation. The building was considered secure, but not impenetrable. The attack happened at a time when the country was experiencing a wave of bold robberies. especially in inland regions. But what was about to happen in Fortaleza would exceed all expectations. The largest bank heist in Brazilian history up to that moment. A true military-style operation carried out by highly trained professionals with sophisticated equipment and a meticulously planned schedule. No alarms were triggered. No guards were injured. No one noticed anything suspicious. The group entered silently, stole millions in cash, and vanished without a trace. Until the next morning, when the shocking truth was revealed. The planning of the crime was meticulous. Every detail was studied with almost surgical precision, from the layout of the central bank building to the movement patterns in the surrounding streets. Nothing was left to chance, and everything suggests the group had privileged information about the internal functioning of the institution. The choice of Fortaleza as the target was not random. Although it was a northeastern capital, it was a strategically important city for such an operation. It had less national media exposure than major centers like São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro, which reduced immediate pressure from the press. In addition, it housed a regional branch of the central bank that held a large volume of cash and, apparently, security vulnerabilities that could be exploited. The criminals began monitoring the location weeks before the robbery. They made discreet visits, observed employees, identified routines, and pinpointed weak points in both physical and electronic security. There were even reports of suspicious individuals hanging around the Aldeota neighborhood without raising major concerns at the time. One of the most important stages of the planning was selecting the house used as a base for digging the tunnel. A two-story abandoned building behind the central bank became the temporary headquarters of the group. It was a discreet location, away from the constant movement of the main avenue, yet close enough to allow the construction of an underground passage directly into the bank. The tunnel was dug manually in some sections and mechanically in others, always carefully to avoid loud noises that might alert neighbors or authorities. The team used hand tools and small machines, everything to remain unnoticed by locals and surveillance cameras. During this process, some members stayed on watch through the windows, ready to warn of any danger. The earth removed from the excavation was stored inside the house in black plastic bags and later transported out during strategic hours to trash bins far away, avoiding accumulation of evidence within the premises. As the tunnel advanced, the criminals faced several technical challenges. The sandy terrain required constant support to prevent collapses. They improvised wooden supports to hold up the tunnel walls and hung lanterns from thin wires, illuminating only what was necessary to avoid drawing attention if someone passed near the house. In some sections, they encountered layers of rock and concrete that further complicated progress. For these parts, they used smaller electric tools such as silent drills and adapted circular saws. Even so, progress was slow, about 5 meters per night at most. Patience was as important as physical strength. Despite all the organization, the heat inside the tunnel was unbearable. Poor ventilation made the air stuffy and heavy, forcing workers to rotate constantly. Some wore makeshift masks to avoid inhaling dust, but the feeling of claustrophobia was inevitable for those who spent too much time digging. In addition, the risk of being caught was constant. The Aldeota neighborhood is known for its dense urbanization and many attentive residents. Some houses were just a few meters from the base used by the criminals. Any loud noise or suspicious movement could have raised alarms, but miraculously nothing significant was noticed during that weekend. While the tunnel grew centimeter by centimeter, another team worked in parallel on manipulating the bank's electronic security system. Using high-tech equipment, they temporarily disabled internal cameras and forged motion sensor signals, creating the illusion that everything was normal inside the bank. The goal was clear: prevent any employee or automated system from detecting the intrusion. Since the crime occurred over the weekend when the bank was closed, the success of this strategy was crucial to ensure the theft would only be discovered the next day, when it would already be too late. After long hours of hard and precise work, the tunnel reached the necessary length, about 25 meters. The last wall to be drilled was exactly the one separating the tunnel from the central bank vault. At this moment, the thieves had to redouble their caution, as any mistake could compromise the entire plan. Using special drills and silent pneumatic hammers, they started breaking through the concrete wall. The hole was made from bottom to top to minimize visual impact and avoid large pieces of masonry falling noisily inside the vault. When the opening was completed, the thieves entered the central bank without leaving obvious signs of violence. Thus, after days of preparation and nights of intense digging, the criminals finally gained access to the vault where one of the largest sums of money ever gathered in a single place in Brazil was stored. The largest bank heist in Brazilian history was about to take place. And now, nothing would stop them from taking away 164 million Brazilian reals. Inside the vault, the thieves found stacks of cash neatly organized in bundles, sealed with plastic strips and labeled with specific values. The bills were stacked on metal shelves, arranged strategically to facilitate handling and transport. That was where most of the stolen 164 million Brazilian reals was concentrated. To move so much money in such a short time, the criminals used suitcases, backpacks, cardboard boxes, and reinforced plastic bags. Each member of the team had a defined role. Some collected the notes from the shelves, others quickly packed them, and others carried everything back through the tunnel, following an improvised assembly line that was extremely efficient. Despite the impressive volume of money, the group remained calm and focused. There was no fight over who would carry more, no serious mistakes, and no one showed excessive nervousness. This suggests there was a well-established hierarchy within the gang, ensuring each step of the plan was followed precisely. During this process, some members of the group were responsible for monitoring possible failures in the security systems they had manipulated themselves. Any unexpected return of the cameras or sensors could put the entire scheme at risk. Fortunately for them, the system remained offline long enough for the theft to be completed without interference. In addition to the cash, the criminals also searched the vault for important documents or valuable objects that could be used later. However, nothing was found besides the money, suggesting that the main target was indeed the currency in circulation at that specific branch. One of the most complex challenges of the operation was the physical transportation of the money to the vehicles positioned nearby. Each trip required maximum care, as any suspicious movement could draw attention from neighbors or night guards. The criminals used discreet vans and dark-windowed cars to minimize the risk of being seen. The flow of money out of the bank was continuous throughout the night and part of Sunday morning. While some took the notes to temporary storage points, others returned to pick up more bundles. This back and forth was done with extreme organization, avoiding congestion or unnecessary pauses in the pace of the theft. Part of the money was divided among the gang members still on site, while another portion would be distributed later, after the full escape from the city. This indicates there was a pre-agreed division based probably on the level of involvement of each person in the planning and execution of the crime. Throughout the process, the criminals maintained constant communication via short-range radios and disposable cell phones. This communication network allowed everyone to know the progress of the activities and stay alert to any unforeseen events. No calls were made using registered numbers, which would later make it difficult to identify those involved. At one point, one of the criminals noticed that some external lights of the bank had been accidentally reactivated. Quickly, he alerted another tech-savvy member of the group, who managed to reprogram the lighting system to turn the lights off again. Small adjustments like this were fundamental to prevent the crime from being detected prematurely. Once the vault was nearly empty, the last members of the group began organizing the area to simulate normality. Some bundles of money were deliberately left in strategic positions, creating the false impression that nothing had been disturbed. Also, any traces of dirt and drilling marks that could indicate a break-in were removed. Before leaving the house used as a base, the criminals performed a final sweep of the location, ensuring they left no physical or digital evidence. Tools were packed, leftover excavation materials were eliminated, and any document that could link the address to the crime was destroyed or taken with them. By around 6 a.m. on Sunday, the last member of the gang left the location. The vehicles carrying the money followed different routes toward predetermined hiding spots in Fortaleza and nearby cities. Some of the participants headed directly to other states, such as Pernambuco and Rio Grande do Norte, where the money would be hidden and prepared for laundering. Thus, after approximately 12 hours of intense and silent action, the largest bank heist in Brazilian history came to an end. And no one, not even the employees of the central bank, had any idea of what had happened. Only the next morning, when regular business resumed, would the entire country be shocked by the scale of the loss and the audacity of the crime.